Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Let's start today's video with a warm-up story about a classic showdown between stubbornness and petty revenge on the streets of downtown Toronto. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned-on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. Wrongway driver tried to bully me. I live in a condo in downtown Toronto, and the entrance to my parking garage is on a small dead-end street with one lane in each direction. At the end of the street is a public parking garage, and during rush hour, most of the traffic heads out from there. One day, I was coming home from an appointment, unfortunately arriving during rush hour. People are always in a hurry during this time and often don't care about breaking traffic laws to save a few minutes. On this particular day, a man decided to be smart and drive on the wrong side of the road to skip the traffic. Despite clearly seeing me coming down the street in the correct direction, as we were almost nose to nose, I stopped my car just short of the garage entrance, my destination. The man in his car expected me to reverse to make room for him. I wasn't about to do that, so I motioned for him to reverse down the street to let me through. He refused. I happened to have a newspaper with me that day, so I put my car in park, turned off the engine, and started reading it right in full view of the guy. Naturally, he started honking his horn, but I ignored him. About 10 minutes later, clearly frustrated, he couldn't take it any longer and reversed down the road to give me space to turn into the garage. Mission accomplished. Sometimes a little patience goes a long way. What's wild is that this guy chose to waste 10 minutes of his own time instead of just admitting he was wrong and reversing right away. It's almost like his pride cost him more than just sticking to the rules would have. Well played on your part. And here's hoping he thinks twice before pulling a similar stunt again. And our second story. Karen demanded I move my fence. About 5 or 6 years ago, I built a fence in my backyard. I spoke with my neighbors, and we agreed on a good spot for it. We had a rough idea of where the property line was based on some survey pins, but neither of us wanted to pay for a surveyor, so we made a handshake deal. I would pay for everything, build the fence, and all they had to do was give me a thumbs up when I was done. Everything went smoothly, and I finished the fence. It worked out well for my neighbors, and I was happy with the result. Then about a year later, they sold their house, and I got a new neighbor, Karen. Karen was from the city, a realtor, and she had flipped 8 houses over the past 12 years. She loved her new house and planned on staying for the long haul. She also had a dog, a German Shepherd mix named Razzie. Razzie spent most of the day outside while Karen went to work. Unfortunately, Razzie was a bit of a handful, aggressive towards children, animals, insects, and even plants that swayed in the wind. As Karen once told me, Razzie also loved to chew on furniture, which is why he spent so much time outside. About 6 months after Karen moved in, I noticed a surveyor walking around my neighborhood paying special attention to my backyard. The next day, Karen showed up at my front door, papers in hand, demanding that I pay her for the 9 inches my fence was encroaching onto her property. I explained that I had made a handshake deal with the previous owners, but Karen didn't care. She wanted the fence moved or money in exchange for the encroachment. She had consulted with a lawyer friend and was more than ready to take me to court if necessary. She told me, "I don't know how you guys do it out here in the sticks, but where I come from, we follow the rules." I had enough of the situation, so I decided to remove the fence. The very next day, I unscrewed the horizontal rails, stacked the fence panels by my garage, and pulled up the posts with my work van. About a week later, Karen came to my front door again. This time she wanted to know when I was going to build a new fence. Without the fence, she couldn't let Razzie outside unattended anymore because she feared he'd run away, attack something, or get hit by a car. She also couldn't keep him inside all day while she worked, and her furniture and carpets were practically ruined. I told her, "Well, Karen, I'm not going to be rebuilding the fence. I don't want any legal trouble, and the best way to avoid that is to not build near your property." Her reaction was priceless. She looked like she might cry. She probably did when she got home. She tried to argue, saying how much she needed the fence back and how she'd even help pay for a new one. She explained how much she loved the style and aesthetic of the old fence, but it was just the location that had been the issue. I stood my ground. There would be no new fence. She never got a new fence. She made a few half-hearted attempts to put up some bamboo fencing, but Razzie tore through that stuff like it was made of wet paper. Eventually, I sold the house and moved away. I took the old fence panels with me, and now every morning when I let my dog out, I still look at them. You outsmarted Karen with patience and a dash of irony. You also tried to be a good neighbor, making a handshake agreement with the original owners and building a fence that worked for everyone. Karen, however, swooped in with her city rules attitude and managed to screw herself over. It's oddly satisfying knowing that you didn't just cave to her demands or get dragged into legal drama. You took your fence and left her with her self-created mess. Lesson learned. Don't bite the hand that builds your fence. And our last story. A pool and jacuzzi special for Karen. I usually just read stories on Reddit, but something so wild happened to me, well, to me and my wife, that I just had to share. Heads up, it's a long story, but I hope you'll enjoy it. Let's start out with some context. We live on the edge of town with fields and farms stretching out behind our house. Our home has been here for ages. It used to belong to my grandparents. After they passed, we renovated it, added some modern touches, and have been living here happily for several years now. My wife and I are both programmers. While our office is in the city, we've been working more and more from home since the pandemic. It's convenient for us, no morning traffic, more time for each other, and we can keep an eye on our daughter, who recently started kindergarten. Plus, we're expecting a baby boy soon. We're quiet, homey people who enjoy our domestic life. On a whim, we decided to start a small garden and keep a few chickens for fresh eggs and veggies. Our garden isn't huge, but it yields a modest harvest: tomatoes, cucumbers, strawberries, and some greens. We even have a couple of apple trees. Hey, how about we get a couple of goats or maybe a sheep, my wife, Anya, joked as we picked out our first hens. You won't believe it, but this is enough for me now, I replied, watching our fluffy birds cheerfully peck around the yard. We agreed not to go overboard. After all, we both work full-time, and managing a large homestead would be unrealistic. But there's one quirky feature in our garden: 2 big oak barrels for organic fertilizer. My wife bought them dirt cheap from a farmer at the local market. We fill them with water, toss in chicken manure and vegetable scraps, cover them with a tarp, and let it brew. Every couple years, we get amazing fertilizer that nourishes our entire plot. Recently, a neighboring house, a couple of lots over, was bought by some wealthy folks for their daughter, whose name is Karen. The previous owners, a sweet elderly couple, moved to be closer to their kids in another city. Karen, who looked about 25, was loaded and seemed to have some serious issues. She loved throwing parties. The louder and longer, the better. When my wife learned about our new neighbor, she just shrugged. Well, if it gets bad, we'll just use earplugs and move on. I wasn't too concerned either. Our windows have soundproofing, and our property isn't right up against hers. There's quite a bit of space between us. But as it turned out, noise wasn't the only problem. Karen was apparently not just a fan of alcohol, but also stronger stuff. Sometimes, late at night, cars would pull up and clearly intoxicated groups would spill out, yelling, blasting music, and causing a ruckus. Thankfully, we live far enough away that it didn't disturb our sleep too much. We were used to occasional noise like barking dogs or late-night clamor, and when I worked late, I'd just pop on my headphones and play some quiet music. So we tolerated it until one night. Around 3 a.m., I woke up to hysterical screaming. At first, I thought I was dreaming or that it was just the wind, but no, it was definitely a human scream, and it sounded close. I went outside and saw Karen. She had somehow turned one of our barrels, covered with a green tarp, into a makeshift hot tub. She must have thought it was some kind of jacuzzi or Japanese ofuro bath. The smell of that barrel, fertilizer mixed with chicken manure, can be detected from 5 meters away, even on a calm day. Yet there she was, soaking in it like it was a spa. She was screaming and covered head to toe in sticky, stinking goo. Her companion, a new boyfriend I assume, was circling around her, simultaneously trying to calm her down and keep his distance to avoid getting splattered. From their frantic conversation, it was clear they were drunk or high or both. Karen, stark naked, or nearly so, jumped out of the barrel, dripping compost slurry from her hair. The boyfriend shouted, "Karen, are you okay? What the hell is this? Let's get out of here." Karen screamed back, "You're filthy, ah!" This was a trap. That neighbor did this. Where is he? I'm gonna deal with him. Watching this scene unfold from my porch, I scratched my head and thought, not my circus, not my monkeys. I went back inside. The commotion continued for about 20 more minutes before it finally quieted down. I figured that was the end of it, but I was wrong. A couple of days later, a friend of mine from the police called to tell me Karen had tried to file a complaint against me. She claimed I had set up a trap, filled the barrel with poison, yes, poison, and lured her into it, practically inviting her to bathe. Naturally, no one took her seriously. For one, she was drunk and aggressive. Two, the smell of that barrel could never be mistaken for a magical jacuzzi. And three, everyone knows my wife and I are peaceful people who wouldn't hurt a fly. Plus, trespassing is still a thing. But the saga didn't end there. Just a few days later, my wife called out from the window, "Hey, someone's making noise in the yard, go check." I stepped outside and saw Karen again. This time she was dressed in jeans and a t-shirt holding a wood-splitting axe. "Hey, Karen, what are you doing?" I shouted. She whipped around, her face red and her eyes wild. "Oh, you'll see what I'm doing," she yelled and swung the axe at one of the barrels. To my surprise, the old oak barrel held up at first, but Karen kept hacking away until, crack, the barrel split open, and 400 liters of water mixed with chicken manure and decomposed vegetables came pouring out. The wave of stinking sludge nearly reached her neck. Karen screamed, dropped the axe, and slipped, landing face first in the mess. Honestly, I was in shock. There was nothing left to do but call the police. You can't just let someone trespass into your yard with an axe. My wife called them immediately, and luckily my friend was on duty again. He arrived quickly. Karen was sitting on our lawn, covered in muck, muttering about injustice and a cursed place. The officers helped her up, wrote up a report, and took her away. I filed a formal complaint for trespassing and property damage. What happens next, I'm not sure, but it looks like Karen's in for a serious wake-up call. Meanwhile, we're planning to strengthen our fence and maybe install security cameras. We don't want to deal with this kind of madness again. As for Karen, she's likely to face fines and visits to the police station. I'm not one to gloat, but I can't deny I felt a strange sense of satisfaction after that second barrel baptism. Let's just say Karen won't soon forget the smell of her victory, and if she decides to come back, well, there's always a second barrel waiting. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.